life, wisdom.
So we've all heard that this cereal is part of a balanced breakfast. And when we see a box of Cheerios or Fruit Loops, they are now adorned with heart-healthy labels, now with fiber, basically nutritional claims telling us that cereals can be part of a healthy diet. Is that true or not?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
So there's nothing in most cereals but flour, maybe some food coloring and added sugar. So those we can rule out right away. One of the biggest problems that we have in our society is the overconsumption of processed grains, grain products. Maybe whole grains could have some value, but for the most part, the cold cereals that we consume in this country are not healthy whatsoever. Now, they try to enrich them with vitamins and minerals, maybe some fiber. Maybe they don't process them quite as much, and they make them a little bit up the ladder. Mm-hmm. But a cold cereal, for the most part, is not healthy. Even the ones that are regarded as healthier brands have been found to have different things in them that were not so healthy, and still primarily flour. If the cereal you're consuming is a flake, or if you don't see it growing on a tree, then it's probably not, or growing as a plant, then it's probably not. And I've never seen O's or flakes or puffs or, and those are flour products that have been made into a shape.
Mm-hmm. So even when we're talking about Smart Start and some of these other cereals, which are marketed like they're health foods, same thing as well?
They're not real food. They've been processed. Right. So if you want to talk about a cereal, you probably have to talk about a hot cereal. Now, they can be consumed cold, a whole grain, but most people can't digest them really well, so we cook them. There's probably some value there. But again, when I'm talking about a cold cereal that's pretty much something I'm going to pour in a bowl and throw some milk over, I'm pretty much just eating flour.
Right. So can you give us a little bit more information about these hot cereals you're talking about? Is that like if somebody buys the instant oatmeal and just adds water, is that considered?
And so many people think that that's just the perfect thing. The instant cereals, it's nice to have something that convenient. Many of them have added cornstarch. They've already been sort of boiled and the nutrition was thrown out. It's going to be instant because there's not much left there to cook. The slow cooked a little better, the steel cut even better. Is it something that you're consuming right from the farm in a sense, or did it go through a processing plant? That's more or less what I'm talking about. So if I use, say, a higher protein content grain like quinoa, I might even be able to make a decent breakfast out of it.
Okay. And so things like quinoa, so if somebody actually went and got the steel cut oats themselves and then prepared them themselves rather than buying the little instant pack that they just add water to, sort of a thing, you're saying this would be potentially a more healthy source of a breakfast.
A little closer to a healthier breakfast, okay. Yes.
So in terms of that claim, part of a balanced breakfast or part of a balanced meal, what would be maybe the truth about a balanced breakfast that people should know about? Because we know that breakfast is one of the most important, or maybe the most important meal of the day. What is the important thing that people know that they're eating for breakfast? It is
an important meal for most people, and it's the meal that most people skip. So you've just done an overnight fast if you slept, and some that we've got our night eaters too. But
right,
you've gotten a fast, and you're awakening, and your body needs some nutrients now. So it's a good time to take in a nice dose of protein. Well, you're usually not going to find much protein in those flour products. So where are you going to get your protein from? You could pick a hot cereal that has a higher protein content, like even an oatmeal or something like that, or like a quinoa or a grain that has some protein. Or there's nothing wrong with eating animal meats. In fact, I think some people think there are breakfast police hunting around because, okay, it's not a breakfast food, I can't eat it. But, there are a lot of foods that can be consumed in the morning that are fine. Vegetables, a piece of salmon, something like that. Have some real food for breakfast. That would be my recommendation. You don't have to have just the pancakes and the waffles and the bagels and all those kind of things. Again, we're just talking about flour products.
Right. So when you talk about protein for breakfast, I think maybe one of the first thoughts is, sausage and bacon.
Right.
What are your thoughts on sausage and bacon?
At least I'm getting some protein content. It depends on again, how those foods were processed and prepared. If you're eating some of the common bacons that have a lot of nitrites and nitrates in them and sodiums, and then you're probably not getting that healthy of a thing. There are turkey bacons, there are other sources. So what's the value, or how was that meat prepared and such? Again, you can have just a regular nice cut of meat as well. It doesn't have to be the sausage and the bacon. Right. But again, how was that sausage made? What was the original meat that it came from? And how much cereal is packed in that?
Right. And we did do another video where we talked more about protein sources and how to pick a healthy choice of animal protein to eat. So that is there for reference if people want more information. Let's go back over to the cereals, because a lot of these cereals have claims on the boxes or in the name of the cereal that imply that they're healthy, or it's endorsed by the American Heart Association, or has some other kind of nutritional claim. Maybe it's made by Healthy Choice. What should people know about how much you can trust of a nutritional claim on the box of a cereal or something like that, for instance?
Well, we could probably do a whole video on how much can you trust the media in general, but it's advertising. And a lot of these claims are based on perhaps some original research. Many of the oat-containing cereals basically are going on research that whole oats were used, and they're just using oat flour, but they're extrapolating the claim. It's not true. The cereal wasn't tested. An original food was. So you have to realize that there's a lot of claims that are made based on something that you're not actually being experienced with, if that makes sense. So I can make claims about things, but am I really consuming what the claim was made upon? And I can just say things, and unless you're going to check it out, then I guess you just accept it. But to say that some cold cereal is going to be heart healthy is really, I don't see any substantiation to it at all. I'm not going to be able to eat that cereal and be healthy. I have to do certain things. I have to get certain nutrients. I have to reduce inflammation. And the cereals probably will increase inflammation. I could probably make a case for the cereals actually creating heart disease. So you need to look at the entire lifestyle, and not is this particular food actually going to by itself do anything for me.
Right. So you mentioned that these breakfast cereals are filled with refined carbs, which are empty calories that just turn straight into fat. They don't contain any nutrition. They're not going to keep us full or satisfied, which is maybe the most important thing that we need in a breakfast. They're also filled with refined sugar. We've got artificial colors and flavors and preservatives. And I think it's important to realize that maybe some of the largest consumers of cereals are kids. How do these different food chemicals and considerations about the health of cereal affect a child, and maybe even a child's ability to pay attention in school and have a successful childhood when their morning is starting with these processed cereals?
Well, it's a big problem, and who doesn't know that if you charge a kid up with sugar, that you're going to have a hyperactive child? I mean, it's almost across the board. I remember seeing a report by CNN, and they were saying new research shows such and such about kids. So I listened on to see what the story was, and they talked about the fact that you shouldn't give kids candy and sugar before putting them on an airplane, an enclosed space, right? I mean, who wouldn't know that just from their own experience? But yet we feed these kids just a bunch of flour and sugar and then send them off and expect they're going to be okay. And they're not. Because sugar is going to do damage. It's going to cause an actual acceleration of the aging process. It's going to cause mental problems, not just through damage itself, but the body actually does better on fat breakdown products called ketones than it does on glucose necessarily. The brain doesn't absolutely have to have glucose. But if all I give is a dose of sugar and then the kids are going to crash, if anybody's been around children, you know the routine, right? So about the time they get to school, their blood sugar is low, and it's a real problem. So the teacher has two extremes to deal with. the brain needs nutrients in order to operate. It needs good fats. It needs magnesium. It needs zinc. It needs a lot of these things that you're just not going to get out of the cereal. So in that deficient state, you're expecting the kid to perform, and they can't.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting that you point out these other nutrients that we need. And it's funny because it's almost like these processed cereal companies are trying to cover all their bases. Because now you turn it over and it says enriched.
Right.
And it's got all those nutrients listed out on there. What does that mean? What should a consumer know about that?
In order to make the cereal, and understand that most of the research on the cereal is in the marketing. Mm-hmm. That's where they spend their money. What shape, what power range, whatever, what am I going to sell? Right. And to adults and to kids, what can I put on the label, whether it's a sports person or whatever. But if I make flour and take all the nutrition out, then I have to add things back in, and I can say, I've enriched the food. It seems to me kind of ridiculous, because why don't I just eat the original food that had the nutrients in the first place? Mm-hmm. And who's to say what nutrient should be put back in? It's interesting that as scientists find, say, one nutrient does something, then they'll enrich it with that nutrient. There was a big media frenzy over folate for a while, and as far as its ability to help with regenerating nerves and especially forming a child. So a lot of these companies started saying enriched with folate. Mm-hmm. And it's the same for each single thing that comes up, but you need a spectrum. You need them all. And just to enrich it with one or two things, or the idea that you're going to get the entire RDA because they put that back into the cereal, I'm still going to be much better off by consuming real food, because what they're going to enrich with is an isolated chemical rather than what's food-borne. And there is a big difference on how it works in the body. Not that you can't use a supplement, but there's nothing to match real food.
Right. And this really, harkens back to our video, real versus fake foods, where we discussed, what is the difference between real and fake food? Because largely there are a lot of labels on the packaging of these processed foods that are misleading. And I was misled myself. So thank you so much for being here and offering this information. And I think that you made a really great point there, that sometimes we feel like, for breakfast we have these only certain foods we can eat, like cereal or eggs or bacon, but really what we need to emphasize in the morning, and especially for our children, is that they're getting a meal of real foods that aren't processed. It doesn't matter if it's not necessarily thought of as a breakfast food. You want to be prioritizing that this is actually a healthy meal that's going to give them the energy they need, give them all the nutrients they need to go out and actually, in the case of our kids, go to school and have a productive day and pay attention and do these things. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And thank you for watching. Please be sure to leave a comment and let us know your thoughts about what we've shared today. If you want to leave a comment with your favorite cereal, we would love to know what that is. Be sure to tune in again next time and visit us at thetruthtalks.net. I'm Psyche Truth correspondent Karina Rachel. Thank you so much for watching.